Hello guys, welcome back to the channel, welcome back to the garage, welcome to the UCC truck prep. So we are getting down to our final days of being ready to leave for Ultimate Callout Challenge. We have, today's Monday, so we've got like 10 days till I want to be out there. So we are still grinding away. We'll be working up until the very last minute. Most of the stuff we're doing from here on out is not necessity stuff. It's not stuff we absolutely have to do, but it's stuff that makes me feel more comfortable and will definitely make the truck more reliable or give it a better shot of living. So that's where today's upgrade comes in, and that is actually here in the rear end. If you guys remember, we just installed our Innovative Machining Solutions brake hubs and our TBM brakes and all that stuff. Got our 16-inch M&H race masters on these Pro Comp wheels. But what we are going to be doing is actually going to the internals of the axle. So that axle housing and all is obviously staying, but we are beefing things up quite a bit. So we got axles, these beefy 300M axles, I believe they are, and this spool right here. So this is a spool for our AAM 11.5. And we have drive flanges and the cover seal thing. So basically what this is the axle is splined on either side, and as you guys can see, it is rather robust. So that is splined, and then rather than having the drive flange built into the axle, these will simply slide over the splines and bolts up, and then this nifty aluminum cover has an O-ring and provides our seal. So what my understanding is, the drive flange setup is much stronger than actually having the flange on the axle itself. So I'm just kind of listening to people who know a little more than me. All this comes from Dirty Hooker Diesel. It's a nice kit they sell. So you get the axles, drive flanges, and this spool. So the spool does two things. This thing's actually pretty heavy duty, but I think it'll be a little lighter than the differential that's in it. The limited slip that is in it, I believe, will be heavier. We will weigh everything just to see, but we're switching to a spool. That way we have maximum traction. We know that the limited slip isn't, leaving something on the table as far as like when we're launching the truck at the track or when we are on the sled pull in the dirt. So that's the plan. Also, that thing should be more reliable. The spool, there is no moving parts. So being that this is a track only vehicle, spool is definitely how we want to go to try and put all that power to the ground. Now, one caveat to this is these axles are like way thick. So these are a lot thicker. We're actually going to have to ream out our axle tubes in order to get them to fit. So we'll talk about that when we get there. For right now, we will pop the wheels and tires off, pop our axles out, and we'll get our differential out and drained. We will be reusing the stock 373 gears unless we find an issue. So we'll get to all that, and we'll talk about reaming out the axle tubes when we get there. As you can see, our differential is out of the truck. So pretty easy. Basically pulled our spindles off here at the end, our IMS aluminum hubs, pulled them off, pulled the axles out, all that. Then we actually had our differential there. So before I took it apart, I actually checked the backlash. So I'm kind of knowledgeable in doing this, not with an AAM 11.5, but with my Chrysler 9.25. I was so violent and terrible with my second-gen gas truck that I had vast knowledge of that rear, and I actually got to a point where I could kind of set the backlash by feel. I'd get it close before I ever put an indicator on it. But so what backlash is, and I did put our drive shaft back on to give us a little weight there. The backlash is your clearance within your gear set. So between the ring and pinion, or between the pinion gear and the ring gear, that's your slop, your play. So I put my dial indicator on there, and you're gonna pull your gear set back till it touches. If you don't have weight on there, like if the transmission was in, this would be much easier. But you pull it down, you zero out your indicator, and then you go the other way until you make contact again. That's your slop, that's your clearance, that's your backlash. Ours is 5 thousandths. Also, one thing that makes me very comfortable with doing this is, like I said, with doing a Chrysler 9.25, they're different than like a Dana rear where you have a shim pack. So you put shims under either set of bearings, and that's how you set back and forth on your ring gear, which sets your backlash. Being we're using our ring and pinion gears over, we actually don't have to change the depth of the pinion. It feels good, so we don't have to do anything with that. But we wanted to know that backlash, so that way we can get back to that 5, because this thing's been rolling around for like 100,000 miles. So it's got a place on this ring gear where that pinion likes to ride. Otherwise we'll get like a whine or whatnot. So back to what I was saying about the shims and all. There's no shims in this. There's just these adjusters. So I actually counted as I took it off. I made match marks, and we actually undid this 3 times. So we loosened it up 3 times before we were able to get our carrier out. Now, when we put our spool in, we're gonna have to double check everything because it's a different unit, so that may be different. If we were just, going back in with this because we just, I don't know, whatever. We had to do something in there. You pretty much just put it back where you need it, or back where it was. So another thing, if you look on here, it says 11 by 41. So that's actually 11 different gears on our pinion gear, or cogs or whatever on our pinion, teeth. 11 teeth on the pinion and 41 on our ring gear. So that comes out, when you divide 41 by 11, to 3.727. So we have 373 gears in the rear of the truck, which I already know. So let me get out of here. So that's pretty simple. One thing too, I always make sure when I take my bearing caps off, I put them side by each, where they came from, driver's side, and they already had the arrows pointing to the outside. So I always put this stuff back in the same spot it was. We won't be finishing this project tonight because I forgot to get carrier bearings. We're here, it's out. Might as well put them in there, and half the time you end up destroying them trying to get them off anyhow. So this is our stock differential. This is a limited slip unit. As you can see, it's like a helical gear design inside. Pretty much standard stuff. This is the tone ring. Typically, you would take this tone ring off and you'd put it on your new, limited slip or whatever, because the tone ring is actually what the sensor on top of the rear there. That's how you get your speedometer reading on these rears. So it just, there's a little magnetic pickup and it catches the teeth, so that's how it knows how fast you're going. So that's kind of our differential explained. And then we have our stock axles and all next to our dirty hooker ones. So as you can see, the dirty hooker ones are way beefier. They're a lot thicker. They're of a better material. And between our drive flanges and our axles, each axle is actually 3 pounds heavier than this one. And our spool is actually like 10 pounds lighter than the factory limited slip. So that's good too. We got to put a ring gear on the spool and our bearings, which we don't have bearings. So now another problem with doing this is that this new dirty hooker diesel axle will not fit in our axle tube. So that is easily, hopefully easily, I haven't done this yet before either, resolved by using a little cutter. So this is a cutter for the axle. You basically put your cutter on there. It will screw on to the axle tube like so. We'll get our drill, we'll run it in and out until we've hogged this thing out. And basically I think we got to go to like here. And then once that's all hogged out, our axles will fit, and then we got to clean everything all out and all that. So big shout out to my man Trevor Peterson and his wife Trista. They live out in Utah, and he was more than willing to ship this out to us so we didn't have to rent it or whatever. But when we see Trevor and them out at UCC, we will be returning it to them. So thank you, Trevor and Trista. Really appreciate it. We're going to get to using this and boring our axle tube out. Sorry for all the talking, but it's a very information-rich subject. There's a lot to go over. People are scared to do ring and pinion stuff, and I don't know why. It's something you can learn. It's not that hard. If this is something you have any interest in doing with any rear, I definitely suggest picking up this book. This is from the guys at Randy's Ring and Pinion. This is pretty much how I learned how to do this pre-YouTube. This is before you go on YouTube and stuff and look this up. So I got this book. It's great. It tells you all about different stuff with axles and setting things up and all kinds of stuff. And then they have a special section with all of your different axles. And look at this, Chrysler 9 1/4. As you can see, the pages are, well, filthy from using this particular section quite often. So we'll get to hogging our axle tubes out and cleaning everything up. And that will probably be it for tonight, because we need carrier bearings, and there's no sense in pulling those off when we got time. So all right, let's hog these things out, and yeah, hopefully it goes well. Well, it is a few days later. We have our new carrier bearings on our Dirty Hooker diesel spool. Everything is nicey nice. So we are ready to install this thing. We got some fresh 75 W90 and all that. So what the process here is, I have our adjusters backed all the way out. So we will take our differential, our carrier, and we will slap it up into there, into our bearing spots. Okay, so it'll be where it normally sits. Then we will put our bearing caps on, we'll tighten them down, and what we will actually do is actually loosen them up like a half a turn, the bolts, so that way we can move our adjusters, because these adjusters won't move once the well, if the bearing caps are tight, they won't be able to move the carrier back and forth. So once we do that, we'll take this ring gear side adjuster, we will adjust it out so that we are driving the ring gear into the pinion gear to achieve zero backlash. So if you remember earlier in the video, backlash is your slot between your pinion gear and your ring gear. So our factory one was 5 thousandths, so that's what we are shooting for, because the pinion is set, it hasn't changed, and these gears have been riding together for years. They have a sweet spot where they have been since they were put in. So that's what we're going to try and achieve. There's no real reason to do a pattern on it, because we're going back to where it was. It's the same ring and pinion. If we were changing the ring and pinion, we would definitely want to pattern it, but in this case, we don't need to. So being it's a new carrier, I decided to forego the whole like 3 turns out thing, because this is a different carrier. It's going to be different. It's just nature of the beast. If we were going back with the stock one, say we just pulled it out, changed bearings, we could probably use that method to kind of locate it. But anyway, we're just starting fresh. So like I said, we'll slap that in there, get it adjusted over to no backlash. And once we have it there, we'll run this adjuster up just till it touches the bearing cap. And then this adjuster will be backed off 4 turns. And then we will actually take this adjuster and push the whole assembly over, and then we will preload the bearings with 6 of these holes or slots on the adjuster, if you can see that. And basically there's an arrow on our bearing cap, so that way we can determine where we're at. We'll add 6 holes of preload, and then we will check our backlash. Once we know where we're at backlash wise, say that puts us at 7 thousandths, what we will do is we will tighten this one up 1 turn, loosen this 1 turn, or 1 notch, whatever. And that's how we will set our backlash and our preload. Also, while we're doing that, we want to try and end with tightening this one, because this pinion gear is actually trying to force the ring gear this way. So we're going to end with tightening this, and then check everything. When we check everything and it's good, we'll bolt down our bearing caps, check backlash again. Then we will remove the drive shaft and spin the thing a bunch of times, check backlash again, and just make sure everything's good. Once we tighten our bearing caps, it's liable to tighten it up and make it smaller than what we want. So that's our game plan. We'll get this thing slapped in, then we can get our axles in, brakes on. We got to do our hub assemblies and all that. So that's the game plan. Let's get our dirty hooker spool and axles in. Our spool is in. Everything went pretty easy with that, adjusting it. Actually, like I was telling you guys about how to adjust it with moving the adjusters, moving those back and forth. And actually, I got it close to where we were within, I think, 7 thousandths. Or no, at first we had it dead on at 5. I put the bearing caps on, torqued them, and now we were at like 3 thousandths backlash. So took the bearing caps, loosened them back up, readjusted it to about 7. It was like 7.5 now. Then put the bearing caps on, tightened them up, and we were right dead on 5 thousandths clearance. So our ring and pinion should be happy. They're riding where they have the last 100 and some thousand miles. So everything's good there. We are full of fluid with some 75W90. Everything is good there. We have our axles all in. Our Dirty Hooker diesel axle setup is complete. Definitely looks pretty good with those cover plates they have. This plate actually seals that axle. So I don't know if I showed you guys earlier. The axle is straight, splined on either side. So it splines into the differential. And then there's splines out here which spline onto this hub. And then there's like a couple snap rings to keep it from going too far in. And this plate keeps it from coming out, but also has an O-ring to seal it. So that's all in. Looks good with our slicks. Definitely digging that. Much better than the black cast hub that used to be on it. And if we hop on the driver's side, so we did have to modify some stuff. So we got this ARP stud kit. It's ARP studs and 12-point nuts. It actually came from Garofalo Enterprises, but I believe it's actually a Hazley machine product. So while we were upgrading all this, I figured might as well, put these studs in and just make sure that's good. Just try and beef everything up as much as possible. The only problem is we had to cut our studs. So if you guys can see that clearance there and that shiny part, had to cut those down because this wouldn't seal otherwise. But that's kind of stuff you get. This isn't an OEM type deal. So, we got a lot going on here. We got Dirty Hooker diesel axle kit, axles and spool. We got our Innovative Machine hubs, and we got our Hazley machine bolt kit. So the fact that that's the only issue we had is fantastic. So that's the thing to remember when you're doing all this kind of stuff. When you start mixing and matching different aftermarket parts and so on, not everything's going to be perfect. Not everything's going to fit 100% like factory, where everything's well, not all factory stuff's easy to do, but where it's easier to do and all that. You might have to modify some stuff, get creative. It's just the name of the game, Innovative or Dirty Hooker probably made this with just like the factory bolts or whatever, or they have their own bolts, and we did this ARP thing from Hazley. And maybe their design is for a different kind of axle. Like they use brand X axles when they upgrade axles, or they just use like the Yukon ones that have the flange on the end. But yeah, when you're doing this race car type stuff, you're going to run into that quite often, as we have on the channel. Speaking of Yukon, we also upgraded our front axle. So in here, which I know it's dark, we have a new Yukon front axle setup. So new stub, new inner axle, and then new Spicer U-joint. So upgraded all that on the driver's side. Passenger side, not so much. And you don't need to worry about what's going on here. So we upgraded all that. Like I said, we have our other Yukon stub here with new Spicer U-joint waiting on the other side axle, which apparently is back ordered. Apparently it's shipped. Will be here in time for UCC. I honestly have no idea, but we're going to find out. So worst comes to worst, we got to run the factory axle. At least one side's upgraded. One big difference, those Yukon axles are chromoly. So they, obviously are different axle shaft and all that, but they get rid of this weak point on the factory axle where it's kind of turned down here. I don't know what that is turned down for, to be quite honest with you, but it is not in the Yukon shaft. The Yukon shaft, this is one solid piece. So that's all done. We got a bunch of nitrous stuff we got to put on later. So still a bunch to do before UCC. Most of it is stuff like the axles where, hey, if we can't finish it, well, this, once we started, we kind of had to finish it, but it's all stuff that we're trying to do as preventative. It's all stuff that doesn't necessarily have to be done. So, you know, we're just kind of working toward that. UCC, I want to leave here in a few days, so we got a lot to do. Our transmission should be back from the guys at Muldoon's. I know the trans that was in it is done. The spare trans, I think they're working on, so hopefully we'll be putting that in the next video. And got to load the trailer. Got a bunch of stuff to do. That mess in the front, see if I can get that done. But yeah, so anyway, guys, that is an AAM 11.5 upgraded axle and spool setup from 30 hooker diesel. Not bad to install, and like that differential stuff, like I said, it's not hard. You can do it. You just got to look at it, you know, focus on it, and it's just a matter of having the right tools, like the dial indicator, and just taking your time and figuring it out. So anyway, guys, I hope you enjoyed. Please like the video. Please subscribe down below. I'll see you guys at UCC. Get out in your garage. Get the wrench on your truck.